As I said earlier, we had art before we had furniture. Saw a wonderful painting in a store which had a bunch of junk and this fabulous painting. And, we didn't have a huge amount of money. We saw this wonderful 20-day painting of a quail. Mm-hmm. There's one like it in Charles King's book. Mm-hmm. They're really very close. But we just loved it. And that's a great thing about having a wife who has a great eye and has the same eye as you do. We said, we have to have that.
I have Peter Miller here.
That's
I'm glad you came back.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's been a year. I think it's almost been exactly a year, hasn't it?
Well, we come out every year for the Herd Show.
Yes.
And we have good friends in Tucson, several sets, and we hang out with them and, of course, come to see you.
Yes.
And you extract money from us for wonderful things.
Am I going to extract some money here, too, today?
Not
Maybe.
today.
Yeah, we'll see.
But we take pictures with us.
Yeah. I love collectors who have this passion that doesn't ever go away. And you not only have it, but your wife clearly also has it. Yep. And so one of the joys of what I do is that I get to meet individuals like yourself. And so last year when we were meeting, we were talking about pots, and you bought some things, and we had a wonderful time.
Yep.
But when I got a little deeper into your story of who you were, which I think I kind of just do now, you have a really interesting backstory, and I kind of like to find out about that part of you, as well as the collecting, but really what you're kind of doing as well. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a St. Louis suburb. So I'm a simple boy from the Midwest. And ultimately, my older brother, was going to go to the MIT to work on his doctorate. And I talked to the guidance counselor and said, hey, this MIT place sounds good. I'd like to go there too. And she says, yeah, right. But why don't you apply to schools you can get into? And it turned out, I was lucky enough to get into MIT. And
well,
we stayed in the area.
We're glossing over a lot of stuff. Where's your mom and dad from? Where are they from?
My mom was from New Orleans,
Uh-huh.
so I had the good fortune to be introduced to great food as a youth.
And music, I bet, too, as well, right?
My dad was from New Orleans. He was the fourth of four kids, and there was enough college money for the first three. And my dad wound up starting out as an office boy in a folding paper box company.
Oh, wow.
And wound up running it.
Wow.
And he's been an entrepreneur a couple of times since then. My brother was an entrepreneur.
And so your dad, he grew up in New Orleans?
No, he grew up in St. Louis.
He grew up in St. Louis, but your mom was from New Orleans.
Yeah.
So and this is really early on, so he's doing his business when he's doing this in the
Well,
20s,
we lost
30s?
him in 2006. He graduated from high school at age 16 in 1930. Not a good time to be on the job market.
Yeah, a horrible time, actually.
Yes. No.
And
Height of the Depression.
Yeah, that really was just horrible. And then that's when he started as the office boy in the paper. It was a box folding?
Folding paper box company. So if you bought shoes or soap or things like that, they'd make boxes.
And he would literally, was that by hand? No, it couldn't have been at that time. They had machines, right?
Big presses that produce thousands and thousands of these things.
And he stayed in that from the very beginning all the way to ending up owning or running the company?
He was running the company, and then they got acquired. And then he went on to do other things.
Yeah, what else did he do?
He and my mom wound up in Florida, and he was looking into containers for the frozen orange juice market. He was working for Mead by then, Mead Paper, and but mostly he wanted to get to Florida so he and my mom could retire there.
Right.
So they did, and then he got on a board of directors for a guy who was in the electrical wholesaling business. And my dad was probably the best sales guy I've ever seen, in addition to being a good executive. He wound up being this guy's partner, and then found that I think it was Phillips had a special kind of pipe, industrial pipe that they wanted to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And in Florida, there's a lot of mining of nitrates and a lot of use of water. You get a slurry and it goes through the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
Dad decided to go into the pipe business. So he
saw an opportunity.
got a franchise from Phillips and built a nice company and sold that. And then he really retired.
And how old was he when he was sold his second business?
60s.
Yeah, so he's still a young guy.
Yeah. And he was long-lived, lived until 91.
Mm-hmm.
And
always active as a business person, even when he retired?
Yeah, and when he retired, he was doing things like joining poetry groups and reading books, and he got involved with the Sarasota Opera.
Uh-huh. And do you think that because he was clearly an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
Did you see that close hand and that affected you as a kid at all?
Absolutely. If I ever get around to writing a book, which I keep talking about, but I don't do it, one dedication will be to my wife. The other will be to my dad for what I learned around the dining room table when I was a kid.
Yeah, what did you learn? What would he talk about?
He talked about how to sell. He talked about how to run businesses. He talked about evaluating people and managing people.
Yeah, what did he say the most important thing about people?
I don't remember him describing it that way. I'm not sure I can answer that.
Because it's clearly important, right?
Oh, very important.
Because that's something that you do as well, which we'll get into to some extent. You evaluate the people that you think have the ability to be entrepreneurs, don't you?
Not so much.
Okay.
I'll tell you about that when
we reach there. Okay, good. Yeah. Interesting. So how many kids were in your family?
My brother and me.
Just the two of you. And your brother's your older brother?
Older brother.
That's the one who also went to MIT.
Yeah.
And so when you're growing up, were you interested in Native American art at all?
No.
Not in St. Louis? You didn't see it or had any interest?
No.
Yeah, that bug comes later then.
It did. My wife and I collected baseball cards. I collected bottle caps when I was a kid. The kinds of things kids collect.
Tell me about bottle caps, because this is a little bit before my time. What are you? It really is. I'm sorry. The baseball cards I understand, but what are the caps that you're collecting? Do they have something on the inside?
Well,
the top?
Back when I was growing up, no, it wasn't anything interesting on the inside, but before, big companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and so on sort of consolidated the field, there were a million different kinds of soda everywhere. We called it soda in the Midwest,
right.
Tonic in New England.
Pop in the other
Pop
places.
in other places.
We call it Coke in New Mexico. Everything was Coke, by the way.
Got it. And so, you could have a variety of bright colors and names and so on. It was fun.
So you were just collecting the names, the colors, and then you would put them on a board or something?
Yeah.
Do you still have them?
No.
No. Okay.
No, long gone.
Yeah. I still have all the things I collected when I was a kid.
Well, we moved around some, and my folks didn't feel at all bad about tossing my collections when they moved.
I'm sure. Yeah, I haven't done that to my children yet, but it's coming, kids, just so you know. It's coming. And so you grow up in St. Louis.
Yep.
You have an older brother.
Yep.
And what were your interests at that time when you were growing up as a kid? Besides just collecting baseball cards and bottle caps, what were your interests? Was it science related?
I like science. One of the great things about my dad, although he never got to college, he was absolutely enthusiastic about science. So we would do experiments at home. We had steam engines, chemistry sets, all those kinds of things that we'd fiddle around with. My brother did his undergraduate work at Washington University, and they had a science fair every year. Not, I mean, I'd enter stuff in the regular science fair, but this was put on by the engineering students. So there were all kinds of neat things that kids could go look at. You'd see people plating something with cadmium.
I'm sure that was healthy for them.
I'm sure it wasn't, but this was in the 40s, 50s.
40s, yeah.
They'd build bridges using engineering principles over short distances that you could walk over.
Were these the Washington U kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the faculty, I think, helped them out. Great stuff.
And so you were seeing that kind of stuff. Were you doing any of that as a science fair? Did they have? I don't know if they had science fairs like they did when I was growing up.
Yeah,
did they?
I entered some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my big thing. I went to International Science Fair a couple of times.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So.
Did you? Well, you're an MD. Were you working in biology areas?
So I'm a DO, but I was interested in in biology.
Yep.
I was interested in the feeding habits of Notropus lutrensis, so the red shiner. So I spent 3 years dissecting small Notropus lutrensis, and did a couple papers that I got to go to Washington D.C. and present. Won a couple of science fairs and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So, yeah, I thought I was going to be a research scientist at that point,
Yep.
following my parents' footsteps. And I think you probably maybe felt the same way. You were going to follow maybe your dad's footsteps into business, maybe? Or not?
I'm a good planner, and I've had lots of jobs where planning was important.
Mm-hmm.
Planning for myself, not so much. I sort of went with what I really enjoyed. I knew Mitch Kapoor, founder of Lotus.
Wow.
And he gave a talk once at the Boston Computer Society where I was on the board, and said, someone asked him, how do you succeed as an entrepreneur? And I always remember his answer. He said, what you need to do is do the things you love doing.
Yeah.
And you're going to wind up okay. If you have a passion for it, if you study it, if you learn about it, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
agree with
pretty
that.
much what I've done. And clearly that's what
Yeah.
you've done.
So you followed your love of what you were
Yeah.
interested in.
Yeah.
And so when you graduate from high school,
Yeah.
where did you go from there? What college did you go to? Did you?
MIT.
You went right to MIT. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know if you
I
went
did
to
my
graduate school.
undergraduate work
Oh
there.
wow, okay.
Yeah.
And you said you didn't. They didn't think you would get in, but clearly
my
you
high
had.
school didn't.
Yeah.
Well, I did okay on standardized tests. And at the time, that was important.
I see. So you aced them.
I did okay.
Yeah, you aced them. You don't just get into MIT if you don't do well.
Well, I can say I'm sure glad I'm not applying now.
Yeah, very
The
competitive.
kids who are there now, I love them. They're incredibly impressive, and no way could I compete with those guys.
And for people who don't know about MIT, tell them a little bit about the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
MIT was founded in 1961. It was in Boston at 1861. It was in Boston at the time.
Yes.
And there was it was a technical school, technical college, and there were some donations. And in 1916, I think, it moved across the river, and there was a big celebration. There was some land that was basically landfill in Cambridge, right on the Charles River.
Mm-hmm.
And they built a gigantic building there with a big dome and lots of wings. And there was a celebration in which everybody who was connected with the school either paraded across the bridge from Boston to Cambridge, or they sailed across, or they wore Viking helmets and rode across. Big celebration. And we've been on that campus on the Cambridge side ever since. MIT has, I think, it's not a huge school, has maybe 5,000 or 6,000 undergraduates, and probably a few more graduate students. one of the things I discovered when I got there that was wonderful, I thought it's an engineering school, but, you can study literature there, you can study music there, you can study economics, biology, just, broad range of technical subjects. And it was a wonderful experience.
And did you do that when you were in your college career at MIT? Did you take all those other areas, or did you really focus in on the more technical side, engineering side?
Yes and yes. I'd gone to a school in the Midwest. I discovered when I got there as an undergraduate that I was competing against people who had attended the Bronx High School of Science,
right,
and had done nothing but study stuff I'd never even heard of for years.
Right.
So for many of us, it was a struggle to keep up, and that was certainly a struggle for me. And but I did find time to go to the music library and listen to things or look at art exhibits.
So you were looking at art at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was in a fraternity, and one of the older guys in the fraternity was from the Netherlands, and he introduced me to MC Escher. And there was an exhibit. Escher was from Holland. And so early in our marriage, my wife, Marcia, and I bought an original Escher, which wasn't very much money then. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any furniture, but we had art on the walls.
Was it a drawing or was it a...
It's a print.
A lithograph, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Eschers are these 3D kind of amazing. I can see what an engineer kind of mind would go immediately to. Do you still have that?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, very good. Yeah,
sure
of course. It's probably gone up from a few dollars from that one.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, I would think so. And so you were finding art to be of interest enough that you actually were buying it when you were young as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're at MIT in what, this is like 48 to 52 kind of time frame?
No, I was there from 58 to 62.
50 from 1950?
1958.
58
to 62.
Okay.
I'm the same age as Tony Day and Sapik Gonzalez.
Yeah, there you go. See, I told you there's going to be art in this podcast.
Yep.
And so you got your undergraduate degree at MIT?
Yep. And then I went to graduate school there. And partway through graduate school, I was working part-time at a company called Raytheon, a defense contractor.
Yeah, which we have here.
Yep. And we were in a strange little department that instead of building missiles, we were doing computer simulations. We were doing studies of scenarios for what might happen in the future. And
like what? What do you mean when you say that? Scenarios? Like war scenarios or?
Not so much as logistics as which countries might get annoyed at other countries, things like that. And we built some computer models to try to figure this out. Remember, this was in the 60s, so the computers at the time were kind of just a step up from pen and paper.
And this is the height of the Cold War, too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we had some Cold War simulations. Looking back on it, it's sort of embarrassing. It was really primitive stuff. But it was a lot of fun, and I learned a huge amount about programming and simulation and so on.
And so they had some huge mainframe that was the size of
a 7094 at Raytheon.
With punch cards.
Punch cards, yeah. You would walk down the hall, and there was a big rack at the end of the hall, and you knew where your slot was in that rack. And you'd look there, and if you had a stack of paper, your program had run, and it printed out. And if you just had your card deck, you knew, I left out a comma someplace.
I took it in college, too, when I was just starting.
Yep.
I was the guy that I'd leave out a comma every time.
Yes.
I didn't understand how this was relevant.
Yep.
But you clearly did when you were watching what was going on.
Well, I was a decent programmer. But again, programmers back then were creating the art, learning on the fly.
This is early 60s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now there are rules, there are procedures, there's waterfall development, there's circular development. There's lots of things that people do now just as a matter of course that had not been invented then.
And did you see the application yet at that point, what computers would be able to do?
No.
Yeah, it's too soon, right?
Well, remember, who was it? Vannevar Bush, who was an important MIT guy and a great scientist, said at one point, digital computers are fine, but, you think about uses of them, we're only going to need 10 in the future. So it's much easier to look back than it was looking forward then.
Yeah. And so you work with Raytheon for how long do you do that?
I was working there part-time, but then what happened when I was in grad school is that our department had started a company, and I wound up being the third employee there. And that company is still around. These days it does about $500 million in revenues.
Uh-huh. What's it called?
Abt Associates, ABT.
Uh-huh.
It was his last name. But I was there for a number of years while we grew it from 3 people to about 1,000 people.
And what do they do?
Research and consulting, a lot of government work. Nowadays, a lot of work in developing countries, helping improve education, sanitation, water supply, a variety of things.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, the Great Society was new, and we did a lot of work helping figure out which programs were working and which were not.
Mm.
And all this was fun, but I'm not really cut out to work for the government. And after some years of that, the thing I loved was building the company. That's the kick. So
And what was that you liked about building a company? What is it?
You face a challenge, you put the team together, you sell what you need to sell to support the team, you grow it, you do good work,
Uh-huh.
and then you do it all over again the next day.
And the growing the company and getting employees, from, you said 8 to 1,000,
Yeah.
that has to be monumentally difficult to do that, I would think.
We were proud of the fact that for a long time we were doubling in size every year.
Oh my.
And this was a bit of a challenge. What it meant was that we reorganized every year, and somehow some of us kept coming out on top of the reorgs. But it was just huge fun.
Yeah.
Just great.
And you were allowed to also continue your postgraduate education while you're doing it?
No,
Or you had to put it on hold?
We were building this company.
Yeah.
So we did.
And you did that for how long?
17 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah. Well, it takes a while to grow from 3 people to 1,000.
That's true. I mean, it really does.
Yeah. And after a while, I realized all I'm doing is maintaining. By then I was the number 2 guy in the company. And I thought, I'm telling the same vice presidents not to do the same things they always mess up on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And keeping track of people and planning and so on.
The fun went out of it.
This is not fun. I'm not building anything.
Yeah.
And I don't have time to build anything. So I left.
Yeah.
I gave them 6 months' notice and stayed on the board for a long time after that. But went off and thought, wow, now I know all about entrepreneurship, and discovered that I didn't.
That you knew nothing.
Probably you've had some similar experiences.
No, I think that's right. No. That's one of the things that I find wanting to do this podcast is fascinating for me to hear how that building of an entrepreneur and how that works.
Yeah.
because, quite frankly, anybody in my business is an entrepreneur.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, if you're an art dealer out there and you're doing this, or an artist for that matter,
Yeah.
you're supporting yourself and you're bootstrapping it and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And whether I think you're a 2-man company or a 2,000-man company or man and woman, there's the same theme that follows
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I want to find out about. So you leave that company because you really have not had the creative juice now. It's kind of
Yeah.
become humdrum in a weird way,
Yeah.
maybe, right?
Yeah.
And so what did you do?
This was in the early 80s, and at that time, personal computers were a new thing. And I was drawn by those. You know, I'd program the big ones, and I wanted to play with the little ones. So we can skip over a couple of embarrassing failures.
No, I like the failures. Yeah, let's hear about the failures.
Here's one. I was on my own, and I got involved in a thing called the Boston Computer Society, which was the largest personal computer society on the globe. And pretty quickly, I wound up on the board there. I was a little bit older than a lot of the people who were there. And somebody heard about me, a guy who was a psychiatrist who wanted to develop an application for keeping track of the number of locked beds in institutions. And what I didn't realize at the time, because I didn't have a huge amount of experience looking at markets, was it's a tiny market. Even if you sell this app to 100 institutions, you're not going to make any money.
There's no scalability.
So he had a programmer. I did some of the strategy, helped him raise money, but it just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So
And when did
those things happen.
When did you figure that out? At what point did you go, this is non-scalable?
After about a year.
Yeah, so you went a whole year.
Well, I wasn't doing this full time. I was doing a variety of things.
And how do you break it to him that this is?
He knew.
He did.
We all knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can only knock on so many doors and have people say, yeah, well, we don't really need that.
Yeah.
When we talk later, I'll tell you about value propositions and customer discovery. And we hadn't done enough of either of those because we didn't know about them then.
Yeah, tell me what that is. That's a good point.
Okay, let's jump forward.
Okay. Then we'll jump back.
Okay, that's fine. There is a program. Well, let's see. Let me give you the short story. NSF, for years, has been putting out grants called SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, I think.
This is the National Science Foundation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And other agencies do too. It's written into the law. And these grants are supposed to let people who are basically researchers turn their research into products that people will want. So you take the research, you find a commercial application for it, and people buy it. And what NSF discovered is that people were making products that nobody wanted to buy. And some very smart people put together a program called I-Core, I-CORPS, for Innovation Core. And they have a standard model. I've sent your son a link to those resources.
Okay. I'll quiz him later, don't worry.
Absolutely. Well, he was saying he's read them.
He has, I'm sure.
And these materials basically allow you to lay out what they call a business model canvas that worries about how you get your supplies, how you price, those kinds of things. It's, like any construct, it's sort of awkward, but it's better than nothing. And it's great for researchers who don't know any of this. But what I-Core focuses on a lot is the value proposition. If I want to sell you software, I have to understand why it's valuable to you, why you would pay for it.
The need.
Yeah. And so that's the value prop. And the great thing about I-Core is that it makes these researchers who are brilliant researchers lots of times go out and talk to people.
Yeah, think about other
Get
things.
out of the lab.
Yeah.
So when you first talk to somebody who has a new diagnostic for emergency rooms, so you can quickly analyze what problem somebody has if they come in with respiratory problems.
Right.
And you say, who are you going to sell it to? And they say, the hospital. And you say back to them, that's nice. A hospital is just a building. Hospitals don't buy anything.
That's right.
What people are you going to sell it to? Go talk to them. And then you find out that there's a big category called nice to have.
But don't need.
Well, it would be nice to have, but it's not the gotta have category, must have. And what we help people do is figure out how you find the must haves. And you take your research, you apply it to those must have things. And that's when you're going to be successful.
So that'll be one of the first questions you're asking somebody who's bringing a business to you. Say, okay, this is our business. One of your very first questions is this a must-have product? And if it doesn't, it goes down in rank.
No. We're talking about two different things here.
Okay.
I'm in the helping business.
Yes.
The work I do these days, I'm trying to give back, and let me tell you about my work at the Venture Mentoring Service at MIT. 20 years ago, this year, 2000, a man named Alec Dingy, who was a MIT grad, and a man named David Stalin, who was an MIT professor, started a thing called the Venture Mentoring Service. And it was based on some great principles. The idea was MIT does a wonderful job of education, and we see all kinds of startups coming out of MIT, all kinds of spin-offs. A lot of those came out of the military, and I'm
grab your water.
Drying out here.
Right there.
And these things are successful, but a bunch of them are not. And so Dave and Alec thought, MIT is not doing a kind of education it ought to be doing. We ought to help people who want to start companies figure out how to do it. And so they set up venture mentoring on several principles. One principle was that it would pay for itself, not by charging the ventures, but by contributions from people and a few grants. And we've been very fortunate that way. I contribute every year. A lot of people do. That we would have non-disclosure agreements signed by all our mentors, that we would not allow our mentors to sell services to the people they were mentoring. That's very different from most programs.
Yeah.
We would not have an expiration date. You want to work with us, we'll work with you as long as you want to work with us. That's very different from, say, a business plan contest. Business plan contest, you have 3 months to put together a nice-sounding business plan. That doesn't mean it'll work.
Yeah.
We also, so non-disclosure, it's free to the ventures. All we ask is that if you're successful, you get rich and famous, think about donating some money to MIT. And some people have done that, and it's great. And so every individual, and we work with anybody who's part of the MIT community, staff, faculty, alumni, graduate students, even a few undergraduates, although we really encourage the undergraduates to complete your degree first. But we work with anybody in the MIT community who is local to Boston who can come in for meetings. And we have mentors. We do team mentoring. We have at least 2 mentors at every meeting. And we give advice. The entrepreneur does the work. And we hope their ventures succeed. But our real mission is to help people learn to be better entrepreneurs. So we've had some people, we don't turn, another thing, we don't turn anybody down. So if you are serious, no matter how wacky the idea is, as long as it's legal and ethical,
Right.
we will try to help you. And some of the time, we'll help you say to yourself, I see this was not a good idea. I will abandon this idea. I'll go take a job. And that's fine, because these folks come back with a new idea, and they're better entrepreneurs for it. So we've had people who've been through 2 or 3 cycles,
Yes.
and ultimately they succeed. Other people say, wow, I have to sell. I have to make this product foolproof so that anybody can use it. I have to talk to partners to sell it for me. I don't want to do that. I think I'll just go take a job.
Yeah.
And that's useful too. That's education.
Yeah, and I think figuring out that you're not an entrepreneur is probably as important as knowing that you are one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah, not everybody is an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of risk that goes into being an entrepreneur, I think, personally.
I am very fortunate to be married to my wife, who
Yes.
has been there through some very lean times.
Yes, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so part of being a mentor, a good mentor, is maybe helping them figure out who they are as a person too.
Yeah, not so much directly as saying you're going to have it. Well, here's an interesting thing we see all the time. Somebody comes to us, and they've been doing brilliant work in some field or other. They say, I want to build a business out of this. And we say, well, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that. Some of them say, gee, I need to find a CEO because I don't want to do those things. I've written some papers about how you avoid making mistakes when you're doing that.
Yeah, like Apple did once.
Yeah, and lots of smaller companies do it all the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes somebody says, wow, I don't have any training in that field. But by golly, I want to run this thing. I want to be the boss.
Yes.
I understand this product better than anybody else. I care about it more. I love this technology. I want to see it get out there into the world. And we help those people become real CEOs. And there are a lot of things in the world that give me joy, but that is sure one of them.
Yeah, I would think that to me, that seems like it would be the greatest one you could offer almost is
It's
just
a treat.
Getting to work with people who've had successful businesses that were CEOs and know the pitfalls and being able to lay a group of things. Here's what you're going to have to do. Here's what you can't do. Here's the problems I had.
And they start doing those things and they stub their toes and we help them through it. It's great, which is why it's nice not to have a short timeline, not 3 months and you got to be out of here.
Yeah.
So we've had ventures who've been with us for years and years.
When I was in school at the University of Arizona doing my residency, I set up a group with every CEO of each hospital in town. I just set up my own internship with them as a part of my residency because I wanted to see what it was like.
Cool.
And it was cool. I learned a great deal about what a CEO is. I also learned that I didn't want to do that job that they were doing.
Yes.
And the headaches that they had running a major hospital were immense. And the decisions, these life, deciding decisions, was amazingly.
It's a tough job.
Yeah. So, to me, what you do and offer in that situation is phenomenal. I mean, I would get something out of that. Even having run my own business for 28 years, I guarantee you I would get something out of that.
Every time I go to a mentoring session, the ones I'm leading, the ones where I'm an additional mentor and somebody else is leading, I always learn something.
I'm sure.
It's great. Yeah.
And have you had some that you somebody brought you an idea and you just thought, I don't think this is going to work, and it did?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And some where you think this is really not a good idea, and it isn't.
And it isn't a good idea.
An interesting thing about the venture mentoring service is that it's been recognized for a while as probably the best entrepreneurial education service in any university around. And the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City gave us a grant to write up how we operated, which some folks did. And out of that, we developed what we call our outreach activity. So the Venture Mentoring Service will show other colleges and universities or economic development groups or cities and towns or provinces in Canada how to take this model and adapt it for their own use. And we just recently, in December, passed the 100 mark for organizations we've worked with.
Wow. So you show them your secret sauce, basically.
Yeah, we get a small fee for it, and that helps support venture mentoring, but they get a huge amount out of it, and some places it takes and some it doesn't. We have a wonderful, innovative ecosystem in Cambridge where we are.
Yeah, you do with Harvard and all the others.
Yeah.
And so that mentoring is mainly to other universities and municipalities as well?
Outreach is teaching our model
Yes.
to other organizations. The mentoring that we do is for people in the MIT community.
Yes, but you're teaching them the mentoring aspect as well when you do the outreach to these other.
Sure.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And we teach them how to train their mentors. And they observe some things that we do.
Does Stanford or Cornell or any of these, or Wharton's or any of these other places have anything like this? Is there anyone else?
I'm sure they do. They're all good schools.
Yes.
And they all do good stuff.
And then and you're in this mentoring program. How many professors are there that take part in it?
Well, we don't. Let's see. I can't think of very many of our mentors who are professors.
Actual professors. They're mainly business people.
Mainly business people. About half are MIT grads, half are not.
Mm-hmm.
We look for a variety of backgrounds. This is not to give technical advice to people who are already technical world-class experts. This is for business advice. We've got about 180 mentors who are active. We have about 295 active ventures that we're working with. We have a very small office staff, and everybody else is a volunteer. And people are anxious to participate because it is so much fun.
Yeah, I bet.
And it's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, and most of the people that are the mentors are a little bit on the older side of the spectrum.
Yeah, we encourage some of it. We've had good people running ventures, and they've had a liquidity event. We say, come be a mentor. And lots of times they do for 3 months, and then they start another venture, and they're too busy.
Because it's in their blood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, we as we recruit, we try to find younger folks. We look for diversity, and we're reasonably successful at promoting those things, but it's hard.
Yeah, I would think, yes. And you have almost 300 different mentoring that you are currently doing right now, 290
Yes.
something?
Yeah.
And what makes a good entrepreneur? I mean, you've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs now.
I don't know if it's written down anyplace. Here's my view of it. Certainly tolerance for risk. It's also having a support group who can also tolerate that risk.
Your team.
Yeah, well, your team,
And your wife.
your wife, your friends,
Yes, that's it. Yes.
people who are sympathetic, who are supportive.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. You also need to have the ability to see things clearly. You know, I've seen entrepreneurs who go out and talk to somebody and they come back and say, wow, they said they love what we're doing. And when we get it more developed, they'd love to talk to us again. And they think that means yes. I know that means no. So, they have to be able to swallow some bitter pills.
Yeah.
They have to be, they have to believe that they know what the right thing to do is. And so you've got this interesting contrast. On the one hand, you have to say, man, I'm smart as hell. I know I'm going to make this thing work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to work my way. On the other hand, you have to say, wow, I've been listening to the market. The market is saying no. I have to adjust what I'm thinking. You can, if you go too far, if you go too far to the market side, you're constantly changing. You never have a real business.
Mm-hmm.
If you go too far to the arrogance side, you're out of business that way.
Yeah.
So it's people who have the balance.
It's almost taking the emotion out of the way you think about things, don't you think, in some extent?
In some sense, except you have to have the passionate commitment to do
Yeah.
it, and that's emotional.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think you have to look at things and make decisions sometimes and not get caught up in the moment of what's going on.
Yeah.
And you have
Yes.
to, I mean, right now would be a good example with COVID-19, right?
Yes.
And you could easily get really involved and go, oh my God, we got to do this, we got to do that.
Yeah.
In a business that it might not really be as affected, and you have to look past the the hype of whatever it is. Now, COVID-19 is going to be very impactful for a lot of businesses.
Yes.
Probably mine to some extent either, as well. Except for my online part, which will be helped.
I'll be careful not to cough on you.
Don't worry, I'll run if you do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I do think that I see that in myself that sometimes you have to look at the long approach and not make an emotional decision. You have to make a good, thoughtful business decision.
Yes. Yeah. And not only that, if you've grown the business some by then, you have to sell that to your colleagues.
Mm.
They all love doing the thing in this direction, and you see that's a dead end, and you have to move them over into there. So not only are you selling to the outside world, you're always selling to your own people.
And yourself.
Yeah. And yourself for the company's own good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember when we started our website in 1996, and
That long ago.
yeah, and thinking, August of '96, and thinking, I think this has got to be the future. I don't know exactly how or why, but
Yeah.
this is really important.
Yeah.
And buying a bunch of URLs that
Yes.
I sat down. I remember being in a hotel room in Oklahoma City, I think, and just writing every URL I thought that could be pertinent,
Yes.
and then buying them.
Yes.
And unfortunately, thinking small and not large at that time, I didn't understand you need to look worldly and not just simply. I was just buying art names and things like that versus, I could have bought foot powder, anything.
Yes.
I could have bought anything.com and I would have been well off.
Yes. I remember that gold rush for URLs.
I remember it very well.
Yes.
So before you started this as a mentoring, there was a fill-in gap that we kind of jumped and missed.
Basically, I helped build 3 different software companies. One in sales and marketing management was sort of, maybe 15 years before Salesforce.com came on the scene.
And it was a similar kind of product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was for laptops when laptops were relatively new. So you'd send your salesperson out with the the information on her laptop, and she'd be able to look up all about the client, put in comments. You'd get those back at headquarters. They'd know to send this and that to the client.
Just like kind of
So it was
mid
customer
to late
management.
80s, is this
Yeah.
time frame? Yeah.
Yeah. And after that, got very interested in helping some folks build a company that did Windows development. I know a bunch of entrepreneurs, and one of them kept taking me to dinner and finally said, come work for me a few days a week. So I did that. And we built that nicely.
And what was that you built?
Whatever a client wanted, but there weren't very many Windows developers at that time when Windows was one pane.
Right.
It was early days of Windows development. We had some tools and did that work. And then in the big .com boom,
2000.
Somebody bought us. I'm going to try to use general terms to not embarrass any individuals. We were bought by a company, and their stock ran way up in the .com boom.
Yes.
But they never did anything having to do with .com. They bought us, a Windows company.
Right.
That wasn't the internet. That was Windows development. So they made a bunch of acquisitions.
Yeah, they're gobbling
And
them
the
up.
stock went to zero. Fortunately, I sold mine way before that. So that was then. Then I had a wonderful time working with a real internet company. I coached their salespeople. I helped the CEO do some things. Here was an interesting problem. You're an internet company. You do web development and stuff. These folks did industrial strength web development, so they didn't do .com work when .coms would pop up and disappear. They worked for big companies, big successful companies who needed to have a web presence. So, if you go to a site and you buy something, there's a huge infrastructure behind that.
Yeah, the back
You've got to
end.
know your inventory. You've
Right.
got to be able to have this thing on the web talk
Yep.
to that thing back.
CRP.
Yeah.
ERP.
Very, very complicated stuff. And these guys were good at that as well as the website. But they found that they're getting treated like pure technicians. They weren't at the table when these companies were planning what they're going to do. So we put together some ideas, and we started a strategy group with two very good people and some not so good people. This company made the mistake of, they were young. They would they found somebody they liked. He or she interviewed well, but they didn't have any real skills. And so they didn't know exactly what to do with them, but they liked him. So they'd hire him and stick him in the strategy group. And sure enough, those people weren't very useful.
Yeah.
Pleasant to talk with, but
Right.
not useful. So one of the things we did was clean that up. But we had some very good strategy people. And then we would go in and say, for a small amount of money, we will help you figure out your web strategy. We'll look at everything you're doing on the web. We'll give you a report on that. And we'll suggest some things that you should do. And if you want to use us to do those, that's fine. And if you pick somebody else, that's fine too. That was a wonderful way of selling bigger jobs behind it. So once we had the camel's nose in the tent, as
Right.
they say,
Then you could write it.
yeah, it went very well.
And so, and the kinds of companies that you would help develop these sites are these Fortune 200 kind of companies?
Fortune 500, yeah.
Fortune 500.
Yeah,
And what years were that? Early 90s, kind of?
yeah,
Yeah. So that was really early, actually, quite thinking about it.
yeah, yeah. They were insanely enjoyable days because I would sit down with the head of sales And we look at the client list and we'd say, okay, who do we have to fire as a client? Somebody who wants to pay us money, who do we have to fire? So, our resource can go to those clients we're going to have long term. And man, that goes against every sales instinct anybody.
And you have to do that because you're looking for long-term viability in the clients.
Yeah, and you want to do very good work for them, so you can't spread your resources too thin. A bunch of our competitors spread their resources thin and went out of business.
And how do you make a decision on something like that? What's the criteria to say, okay, these folks aren't going to make it and we can't take their money?
Well, they'd be very good companies, but they just didn't appear to have the kind of viability that, let me try to compare some sanitized examples.
Okay.
A company that makes batteries for your radio.
Right.
They don't need a huge web presence necessarily. A company that sells a whole bunch of semiconductors in a variety of fields to a variety of people and does design work to figure out how to put these things together. That's a wonderful client, and they're going to be there forever.
Multidimensional.
Yeah. Or a retail company that wants to have a web presence so they can sell over the web what they sell in their stores with a whole wide
SKUs.
Inventory of stuff, lots of SKUs. Yeah. Those are the people we kept. The other ones we politely said goodbye to.
In some respects, it's in their best interest too, probably, the businesses, because they don't have to spend the money on a company that's very expensive and, at that high-end level, when the reality is they don't need that because they're more one-dimensional. And you see that in our business as well, in the gallery business. And
I'm sure.
I gave somebody some advice the other day, and they want to build a website and redo their website and everything. And it's like, well, how many SKUs do you have? And like 250. Well, you need this. You don't need that. You don't need a Magento or Shopify. Probably you can get away with this.
Yes.
You don't need to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
And I think knowing who you are and what you have is important.
Yes.
And in our field, it's very hard to find mentors, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, they don't want to give the information away.
Yeah.
Is that the same in technology?
No.
No, it isn't,
Not
right?
so much. Well, sure. There are different personalities. But I look at our mentor group, and those are a bunch of people who know lots of things that they might hide if they're worried about competing. Mm-hmm. But they're in a helping environment. They're there to help people. And it's a kick to share what you know with somebody and have them say, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. And
you might change the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you finish this third company with the business where you're doing the development of the web, what do you do next?
After that, with an MD, I started a small company, boutique consulting company. And what we were very interested in genetics. I know some people who carry some genetic markers which are toxic. I've lost friends. Mm-hmm. I've lost people I cared about deeply because of these genetic diseases they carry.
Right.
And this doc was very interested in genetics, and I was interested in the problem, in the trying to help find ways to get this the new technology into use. So we started a company to help people, to help anybody who wanted to figure out what the impact of the new science, genetics, genomics, metabolomics, mm-hmm. How that science would affect their markets, how to enter markets where those technologies were going to be valued. And at first, We had some small clients. We did strategy work. We did some market estimates. We did some customer discovery for people. And pharma treated us like something stuck on the bottom of their shoe because they had the blockbuster model. That's how you make money in pharma.
Yeah.
And they have their compensation systems and the way that they do things. But we did this for about 15 years, 13, 15 years, until other people caught up, and it was so competitive it wasn't fun anymore.
And so would you work on things like orphan drugs, that kind of things, for those type of treatments?
A little bit, but what was great was that finally, toward the end, pharma came knocking on our door. So we wound up, for example, in a large European city, staying at an extraordinarily luxurious hotel, and meeting in a historic old building with the CEO, the board chair, and the head of the 15 divisions of a well-known pharma company, saying, "This is what's wrong with your diagnostic strategy," and having them say, interesting. Basically, we said, don't do these three things that a major consulting company told you to do, and you should do these three things that you're not thinking about but are going to be really important to your future. So being big pharma, they didn't do the three things we told them not to do, and they didn't do the other things that we told them they should do. And since the board chair had come out of that large consulting company, we were not allowed to do any more strategy work for them. But we had a good time, and we gave good advice and helped some people.
Yeah. But the big boys are just too big to understand how to implement this, or it's...
The big boys need to get their advice from big consulting companies.
I got it.
Not from two-person smart people who look ahead.
Yeah.
That's fine.
No, but yeah, they're looking... It's like an actor. If you're a great actor, if you're a well-known actor, they're going to go only to you for the movies, and there could be some other people that would make it so much better.
Yep.
But because they only want the prestige or the name, or they assume they must be the people that they have to use.
But that's how that's one of those examples of seeing what the market truly is.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
And so did you end up selling that company?
No, we just shut it down.
Yeah, you did what you needed to do, and you had...
We had a good time. We got paid for our time.
Yeah.
We stopped.
And you probably learned a lot about diseased and genetic...
Yes.
It's very interesting genetic changes. I mean, because that thing's exploding, still continues to explode.
Absolutely.
I mean, at some point, they're going to have sickle cell taken care of, I think, here in the in the near future.
I hope relatively soon.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And so then did you go into your mentorship after that, or did you do another?
I'd been mentoring. I've been at the Venture Mentoring Service as a co-director since about 2002.
Oh, yeah, so you've been doing it a long time, 18 years.
We were doing our boutique thing part-time.
Part-time.
Yeah.
And so the mentoring really takes a great deal of your energy and your love.
It does, and I'm doing a fair amount of work with ICOR at the same time.
Yes. So. And so when did you develop your love for Pueblo Pottery, which is how you found me? Yeah. Yes. Let's get to the stuff that's really the juicy stuff here, folks.
I'm boring. Pottery's interesting.
Well, I find it all interesting, and I bet we'll see a correlation somewhere between how you collect pottery and what you do for all these different jobs.
Well, I was incredibly fortunate to find my wife. I was an undergraduate at MIT. She was a freshman at Tufts, and we met and started dating. And from toward the end of her freshman year to now, we've been dating exclusively. Yeah. We've been married 55 years now.
Yeah, good for you.
3 kids. who are all great. But Marcia, we we are both collectors. I've seen marriages where one person is a collector, the other isn't,
Yeah,
and it's a source of strife.
always. It is.
Yes. But we're both collectors. And basically, if one of us is interested in collecting something and the other isn't, then we just won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while, we collected antique toys. That was fun. And we had a world-class collection of an obscure German manufacturer
Mm-hmm.
of lithograph tin toy trains.
What was the manufacturer? Do you remember the name?
Sure. Johannes Andreas Ismayer
Uh-huh.
out of Nuremberg.
Are these like 1870 kind of toys?
1870 to about 1910
Uh-huh.
was where we collected. And we had, I think, probably the best collection of these in the world because nobody knew about them.
Yeah.
They never had a catalog, unlike some of the other major manufacturers. So we had these people were encouraging us to write a book about this manufacturer. We didn't have time. And we got, well, frankly, we got tired of it. And so we sold our collection at auction. Somebody else has written the book.
Mm-hmm. What auction did you use?
Noel Barrett.
Yeah,
at
no,
the
Barrett.
time.
Yeah, he's the toy guy.
Yeah. And
What year was that you sold us?
it's probably 15 years ago now.
Yeah, so they were up there because that market's
Yeah.
kind of reconsolidated, I think, somewhat
Yeah.
since then.
Yeah. And eBay
Yes,
has sort of had a difficult effect on that market.
I bet.
Well, we used to go to the antique show at Brimfield in Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
where you'd find all sorts of things that people didn't know what they were. After eBay, no more.
Yeah,
And after Antiques Roadshow, we knew the WGBH producer
yes,
of Antiques
yeah. They're out of
Roadshow.
Boston, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and nice guy, but boy, did he put the kibosh on our hobby.
Because you couldn't. Well, I mean, one of the things that eBay did, I think, for a lot of collectibles like that,
Yep.
is things that we thought were very rare. All of a sudden, there's dozens.
Yeah.
Then, and it's like that. The market goes down.
The other thing is when Noel Barrett or somebody else says something on Antiques Roadshow,
Yes.
this is a really important thing. Everybody across the country says, oh, I have something that's kind of like that. It's rusty and it's no good, but mine's worth that much
Yeah,
too.
of course.
So
Yeah, everybody's was great.
it messes up the market. But by then, we'd been spending time in the Southwest.
Uh-huh.
And, we love Tucson. We love the herd show. We used to love the SWIAF, the show at the,
In Indian Market.
yeah.
Yeah, the Indian Market every year in August.
And we live outside of Boston, and Skinner auctioneers are
Yeah.
in Boston, as you well know.
Yes, I do.
And we had some pots. Well, let's see, how did we get started? We knew about Maria, so we bought some Maria pots through Skinner, and that was sort of our starting point.
So you did buy a Tony Day painting early on, right?
That's right. In 1970, we were
Yeah.
in Denver. I was still with Abt Associates,
Yeah.
and I was running a project that involved going to Oregon, to Denver, to Texas. And we were wandering around and saw a wonderful painting. As I said earlier, we had art before we had furniture.
Yes.
Saw a wonderful painting in a store which had a bunch of junk and this fabulous painting. And, we didn't have a huge amount of money. We saw this wonderful Tony Day painting of a quail.
Mm-hmm.
There's one like it in Charles King's book.
Mm-hmm.
They're really very close. But we just loved it. And that's a great thing about having a wife who has a great eye and has the same eye as you do, we said, we have to have this. So it was, I think, $250.
This was like the early 70s, 73 or
It
something?
was 1970, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was what, 200?
$250. Yeah. And
We can do a nice trade-in on that one. You'll come out very nicely on that.
I think so. But of course, we love it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's what true collectors do. There's no way in the heck you're going to give that up. And hopefully one of your children likes that as well.
Well, we're fortunate. Our kids never had any interest in our early toy collection, and I've talked to them. We're not kids anymore. I've talked to them about, hey, we're collecting this wonderful pottery, with the help of people like Mark Sublette, and should we, write down auctioneers' names, and we've got everything listed carefully. Do you want to know where to take it to auction when we're gone? And I said, no, we like it. We want to keep it.
Good for them.
Our two daughters, anyway.
Yeah.
So we were thrilled.
Yes.
So maybe it'll continue on, or maybe they're just scamming us, and but they enjoy it. I send them pictures when we buy something, and they say, "Oh, that's wonderful."
Oh, and so you really first started kind of through Swaya and the Herd, use them, and then found dealers as well that deal. And so you particularly like the Hopi material, right?
We were taking a trip. When we have friends in Tucson, and we'll always make sure we spend time in Tucson to see them. And then we like to travel around, so we'll go various places. And one time we drove up through Hopi, and we wound up in McGee's store in Keams Canyon.
Yeah.
And there was a pot by Steve Lucas.
It was wonderful.
Yes. And I said to Marcia, we say these things to each other when we're someplace. What have you seen that you like best? And she said, I love that pot over there. And we looked at it, and it was very nice. And it was not cheap. And we'd never spent that much for a pot. And so we took pictures of it, thought about it, went home, and called up and said, we want to buy it. So we did. So that was our start in the Hopi area. Earlier than that, we've been in a Skinner auction. And as I say, Marcia has a wonderful eye. When she was a freshman at Tufts, she'd do other people's art projects for them and get A's in her spare time.
Yeah.
Although she was a biology major. But she, across the room, she's now a silversmith doing wonderful work, by the way. Across the room at Skinner, she said, I love that pot over there. And it was a Lucy Lewis Yakima pot.
Yes.
And, small, not horribly expensive. And so we have managed to find all four of the pots by all four of the
daughters, like Emma,
of the matriarchs there. And actually some we bought here and some we bought at auction. So we had Maria and we had Yakima. And then we got hooked on Hopi. And we've spent time on the reservation. We now have Hopi friends. We've been adopted into a rabbit tobacco family.
That's wonderful.
And we just, Marcia has a wonderful eye. She likes research. She likes hearing about research, but she doesn't get excited about, I can spend 2 hours on the computer tracking down this artist and their background and their family. And so I get excited about that. I'm a geek.
Yeah. You like data.
Yeah. So we jointly, I do the research, we share what we're interested in. And so
And that's where you talk about it. So you'll look
Yep.
at the piece, you take pictures, and then you do your end, which is do a little research on maybe market factors as well as just
Yep.
the history of the person.
Well, and we like to collect families.
Yes.
So years ago, we were very fortunate to buy. Well, it wasn't cheap to buy a Nampeo pot, not the one from you, but a different one, which had on the back the sticker from the Hopi house.
Yes.
That said, "This is Nampeo,"
Yeah.
which I
$2.50
think is
or so.
pretty good provenance.
Yeah. Did it have a price? Often they'd have a price.
It's only part of the sticker.
Yeah.
You can read it, but no price
Yeah.
data. And that got me and got us interested in not in the Nampeo family. So we have various Nampeo descendants. We love Dextra's work.
Well, there's a great show, a great exhibit at Scottsdale Museum of the West of Hopi material. Have you
Yes.
seen that? Yes.
Yes.
It's an
Yeah.
amazing collection.
Yes.
And it's a permanent exhibit, too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd never seen so many Nampeo pots in one place.
No, it's fantastic.
Yes.
And so, what advice would you give? Because you've been doing this now for a while. I mean, you collected your first painting, not the Escher, but the Tony Day 50 years ago. What would your advice to collectors that are starting today? What that you did as a collector?
Find something where you've got a common interest with whoever you're partnered with. Research. Think about the shape that you want your collection to take. I mean, we sometimes refer to our collection as a matriarch collection because we've got Acoma matriarchs, we've got various Maria partners, and Maria and Papovi Day and Tony Day. We've got Nampeo family. So think about a structure that you're comfortable with, because you can't just buy everything. Well, you can, I suppose, if that's the kind of collection you want.
Right.
We have not a huge amount of space, not a huge amount of money, so we've tried to come up with some things that help us limit the scope of our collection. So we collect within that scope, which is still pretty broad. You've got a Papovi Day pot out there.
Yes.
That I love.
Yes. So rare.
Yes.
This is a piece that we just recently got in that's just signed by Popovi, and I bet he didn't do more than 75 pieces tops.
Yeah.
And I bet it's even less than that.
Yeah.
And the ones I've always seen were the best. They were just perfect. They were beautifully done.
He was an extraordinary artist. Yeah.
Some would say he was the best at firing of anybody. I know Nathan Youngblood said that one time in a talk. I heard him say that he thought that Popovi was the best at firing of anyone.
Yeah.
Period. And that's saying something from Nathan Youngblood.
and he was a wonderful painter as well.
Oh yeah, as was his father.
Yeah.
And as was his son.
Yes. Yes. So right now we're focusing pretty much on Hopi. We bought up at the herd a Rondina Huma pot, little one, the other day. We found a very cute little high C Nampeo pot that we love. Again, not that it didn't empty out the bank account.
Yes, good. We're glad to hear that.
Yeah. So we're constantly keeping an eye out. We look at auctions. We go to dealers.
At what point did you realize you were a collector of these?
Pretty early.
Yeah, when you had 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we are careful of each other's sensibilities. We don't want to spend a lot. I don't want to spend a lot of money on something Marcia would hate, and vice versa. She likes birds, so we buy various bird things in her office. She has a
Good to
giant
know.
Canada goose overhead. Our living room mantelpiece has a bunch of small bird carvings
Uh-huh.
on it. We've got birds all over the house.
How about pottery?
Not pottery birds.
Yeah,
No.
Grace Medicine Flower did some wonderful hummingbirds.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a few of them out there that did great birds. I'll point out one when we get through with this podcast, actually.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that point up for me.
But, we try to make sure that we agree on things.
Yeah.
There was one pot that we bought at auction. It was a Mark Tabo pot.
Mm.
Oh, God, he did wonderful work.
Mm-hmm.
What a loss that
Mm-hmm.
he's
Yeah,
gone.
so young, too.
Yeah. And it had kachinas on four sides, the ogre kachinas. And I basically said, I love this pot. I'm going to bid on it. I really like this pot. And Marcia said, well, it's okay. And we bought it, and she has come to love it as well. And, having the four kachinas lets me read Walter Fuchs about, the wonderful drawings he has.
Right, the Hopi Mass book they did, yeah.
I've almost gotten around to buying a first edition, but they're reproductions that are almost as good. But maybe someday we'll get a first edition.
Yeah, we've had them come through here periodically. Yeah, I probably have one in my library somewhere. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah.
That could be good trade bait for you. Okay, Mark, I'll buy that. But where's that Fuchs book?
Yes. We've learned a lot about kachinas from that. I don't think we'll collect kachinas.
Yeah.
But we have some Hopi friends who make kachinas, and it's nice to buy something made by a friend. Mm-hmm. We don't collect baskets, but we have a Hopi friend who makes baskets. We made sure we bought one of his baskets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it makes it more personal, too.
Absolutely.
Really. I think that's one of the great things about whether you do the Herd Museum show, which is coming up next week, I guess.
Yep.
And it's first week in March, basically, in case this runs after that. And Swaya,
Yep.
in the 98th Swaya or 99th, I think it's 98th Swaya at Indian Market in the third week in Santa Fe, which I haven't missed in 40 years. Wow. So I go every year, and you can really learn a lot, and you can meet some people, and you can become friends with them. In my case, Shanto Begay, I met at the Swaya show, and not only became friends with him, but represented him. So and have for 15 years now. So they are worth doing and seeing. And look, and for you, I think that was it sounds like one of the things that kind of pushed you into the direction of pottery, probably.
Well, I'm fascinated by history. If you go to Walpi, and it's an indescribable feeling of age and reverence and so on. How can you not love it there and be excited to meet the descendants of the people who are there, who are lovely people themselves?
Yeah.
It's a treat.
Well, Peter Miller, you're a lovely person as well. I appreciate it. I really, thank you for taking the time. I know this was like one of these podcasts where he's in looking for pots and I grab him and steal him away to get the information. But, it's important, I think, for people to hear your voice. You've done this amazing life. You've done all these interesting things. You're a mentor, but you're also collecting Native American art. You're supporting artists. You're supporting that whole area of interest as well. So you're very appropriate for my art dealer diaries.
Great. Thanks, Mark. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. And it's always a pleasure coming into your gallery.
All right, let's go look at pots.
Okay.
Peter Mell, thank you. All right. That was wonderful.
I'm sure. I assume you edit these babies.
Oh, no editing. We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.